Hi, hello, salut, bonjour. Bonjour le Cameroon, bonjour l'Afrique, bonjour le monde entier. Greetings to you all across the globe as you continue to support this movement on the civic education series that is focusing on Cameroon, the Republic of Cameroon, especially following the presidential elections that took place on October 12th, for which the results have just been declared, the official results by the Constitutional Council. Once more, I thank you all for staying faithful to this particular journey, and up until date, if you shared the conversation, you liked, you subscribed to the platform, and you continue to make your voice heard, we thank you for your continued support. We see your comments, we see your encouragements, and we stay resolute to continue to bring you fresh information, give you in-depth analysis, and present the bare facts in front of you so you can see for yourself what the Cameroonian people have gone through and are still going through, and there's even fear for more. Why? Because as we speak to you right now, the Constitutional Council of Cameroon, in an exercise that lasted no longer than 45 minutes, was able to project and proclaim that President Paul Biya has won the elections with about 53.7% of the vote, and Issa Tchiroma Bakary, the front runner, whom the people say they voted for and whom the people believe is the legitimate president, was given a percentage of about 35.2%. And it was dead silence when these results were announced at the Yaoundé Congress Hall, in an environment where it was most likely scanty than you would expect for a ruler that has been in office for 43 years. He would have been expected to see a full house, but then you could see that most diplomats from reputable countries that really stand for democracy were not present. We do know that at the end of the ceremony, the Constitutional Council protocol called for a photo op, which would have involved and included all the diplomats and people from different walks of life. Independent observers and opposition leaders say this looks like it was carefully calculated to be able to capture the moment and see on photographs all those who came to support the 43-year-old regime that is going to have a 7-year mandate to make it 50. And as we speak, it's a president that has been in office since 1982, before which was a prime minister, before which was in high offices at the presidency under President Amadou Ahidjo, and today has been proclaimed the winner of an elections, whereas the campaign results show that he stepped foot only in Maroua in one outing and addressed the people in a speech where the President of the National Assembly could not even articulate phrases because, of course, his microphone was seized from him at some point during the speech. You could see the country going into turmoil because long before now, there have been reports of different levels of intimidation, because it turns out that the millions of people that are not happy with this result, for which we say reports from independent observers, the opposition parties, as well as civil society leaders, show irrefutable statistics that Elections Cameroon, a body that's supposed to be independent to organize free, fair, and transparent elections, was unable to provide the national voters registry prior to the call of the elections. And that wasn't done, which was in violation of the law. And independent observers are pointing to the fact that it shows that the results were already pre-decided before the elections took place, because the way it was carved out, this information was made public 2 or 3 days after the elections had concluded, and the PVs, the procès-verbaux, were going through the different channels to get to the National Commission for Final Counting, where they were able to prepare a final report, and the Constitutional Council just did a reading exercise and proclaimed President Paul Biya the winner. Having said that, it's now important to paint the full picture as to what's going on the ground in Cameroon as we speak. Issa Tchiroma Bakary put out a video today in which he's showing clearly that his home is under siege and that there were snipers stationed at a neighbor's roof shooting at people in front of his house that are protecting him, the human shield that have been there to protect him throughout these tense moments. And there are reports of some people dead, and they are still investigating to see through the bullets where they came from. Members of Issa Tchiroma Bakary's team state clearly that the snipers perched at the rooftop of this former FSNC member, who is now siding with the regime in place, and was also seen celebrating the victory after the proclamation of results, that those snipers are there because they want to shoot and kill those that are forming the human shield in front of Issa Tchiroma Bakary's home to clear the way so that he can be arrested and probably killed. And Issa Tchiroma Bakary, by raising his hands up in that video and saying a prayer, was able to console the youth and tell them that he's ready to die for this cause, and that if he's going to die, the movement will continue, because he is not the only target. The Cameroonian people as a whole that voted for him, and the majority that want change, they are not ready to let go, and therefore he is going to stand by them and is resolute. And that also continues in line with the same theme of the videos and comments and messages and posts that Issa Tchiroma Bakary has been putting out. Because yesterday, as you can recall, Issa Tchiroma Bakary put out a video where he said clearly, while addressing President Paul Biya, he told him, the outgoing president of Cameroon, he told him and said his only crime is that he won an election. And that was a powerful moment, because the supporters and those that were on the streets, as you all know, there was mass protests across Cameroon yesterday, Sunday at 3 p.m. It started timidly, as you'd expect. And the videos that came afterwards and the photos show a great mobilization, because it's a sample size of a population that is around 30 million. And being under a regime for 43 years under terror tells you that people may not be inclined to go and protest, but they are disgruntled and continue to show their support in front of their balconies. And you can see people filming those that were on the streets. And at some point, the military was alongside the people in some cases. And we have an unfortunate report that 4 people died in Douala because of the shooting that took place, because there's even a photo of a female officer that is from the gendarmerie that is said to have used their guns because instruction came from above. And there are reports of independent observers as well as members of the opposition party pointing accusing fingers to the regime in place and the CPD and party officials for using the armed forces and the security forces like the police and the gendarmerie to actually give them instructions to shoot civilians that are armless and just trying to protect their votes as they continue to walk down the street and celebrate a victory by calling Issa Tchiroma Bakary's name and calling him their president. That this is their democratic right protected by the Constitution and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Article 21. And therefore, they blame the regime in place for actually killing its own citizens. And as you would recall that earlier on in the week, Zaratu Hassana, the young teacher in Garoua, the female young teacher in Garoua who was shot and killed in her neighborhood during a protest. And all these protests have ensued across the country ever since leaked results from the National Commission for Final Accounting came out, indicating that what we are seeing today was already in the pipeline. And those results don't seem to have deviated from the leaked results. And again, we do see a confirmation that the northwest and southwest region of Cameroon that are heavily enclaved and facing a dire crisis, where citizens have been under lockdowns every Monday for over 8 years, 9 years now. And we do know that on elections day, there were firm instructions for people not to go out and vote. So on the day of elections, there was virtually no one at the polling stations. But yet the results that were read at the Constitutional Council give a high voter turnout and an overwhelming majority to the ruling CPD and party candidate, President Paul Biya. All of this has gone a long way to anger the youth across the country, because they could tell that this is blatant disregard of the people's democratic right to choose their own leader. And you can tell that with the gunshots that we hear, the protests that have been dispersed, people running for their lives, videos popping all over the internet, showing that the people are rallying to protect and protest that they don't want this regime in place again. Now, it begs the question, if 53% of the electorate, which is a good size of the population, if you have to break it down to families and break it down to different communities, if 53% voted for a 43-year-old regime that has been in place, then one should expect to see a majority of people on the streets celebrating the victory. But you can see from all the reports that are coming, whether it's from Poste Central in downtown Yaoundé or Avenue Kennedy, or even right into the Bonanjo region of Douala, and even the headquarters in places like Limbe and Boya, it would tell you that there is no effervescence of people celebrating. The images and the reports speak volume, because it is unheard of that, to take the analogy of football, when the Minister of Territorial Administration, Paul Biya, said, When two teams, Real de Madrid and Coton Sport de Garoua, are pitting against each other, what do you expect the results to be, the outcome to be? And today we can say that according to the Constitutional Council, Real de Madrid has won as always. But in this case, it's unfortunate that that analogy is even used because in essence, Coton Sport de Garoua is in Garoua and playing on home turf. And evidence shows that Coton Sport de Garoua, from all the polling station data that was collected on the day of the results, according to Section 113 of the Electoral Code of Cameroon, the same code that despite its flaws, the people were able to overcome and transcend and in their numbers to go and vote for Issa Tchiroma Bakary. One can contrast that there is a difference between reporting the facts and analyzing the stats because the statistics cannot lie. And if there is a contradiction, then the procès verbal from Elections Cameroon should be contrasted with that of Issa Tchiroma Bakary's team to be able to bring the truth. And that is why independent elections observers across the globe who have lent their voice to this electoral process are stating clearly that the only way that the regime in Yaoundé could have legitimized this victory was to make sure that the procès verbal of Elections Cameroon be contrasted with the results that came from the polling stations according to those independent observers that were in the polling stations from the different political parties to be able to bring the truth to light. Some sort of a total recount of the whole process and also proof with the voters register and also proof with the ballot box, with the ballots that came from the ballot box, because all of this information is supposed to be kept for at least many, many years, because that is a property of the state now, where you can gather this data in case of a petition. But you could tell, and when you saw all the petitions being dismissed at the Constitutional Council, it was nothing new to Cameroonians, because many people interviewed said they were not expecting anything different from the Constitutional Council. Because the majority of the Cameroonians that have been interviewed in all reports that we've seen so far continue to point to the discredit of the institutions that be, especially Elections Cameroon and the Constitutional Council. They decry the fact that these organs are working for the state, and despite being appointed to be neutral, they have not stopped paying their allegiance to their former political party, which is the CPDM, because the majority of them are from the CPDM party. They are appointed there as some form of compensation, and therefore they feel obliged to continue to respect the status quo in Yaoundé by almost regurgitating everything that they are being fed. And it is unfortunate because we have reports that even the National Assembly has not been able to produce laws that can change the life of Cameroonians simply because there is a supermajority of the ruling CPDM party. And it has been the case since the 1980s. And up to date, it's been impossible. So Cameroonians don't have recourse even with their elected officials through parliamentarians, because municipal councillors try their best because it's some kind of governance of proximity. But again, due to the poor decentralization structure, they decry the fact that they don't have funds to be able to even take care of small amenities in their communities. And therefore, if the parliamentarians in parliament cannot change the laws to better the livelihood of Cameroonians, and then Cameroonians cannot use the electoral process to vote a legitimate candidate to go in office and be a president to represent them, one is left to ask themselves a big question. What is the future of Cameroon? With a youthful population that amounts to about 65% of the entire population of 30 million people, one is left to wonder, what is the future of these young people and this youth? Because according to international organizations, the immigration rate, the migration out of Cameroon is so high. So many Cameroonians are leaving Cameroon who are of age that they can participate in governance in many walks of life. But they choose to leave the country because there is no other option. Many of them are interviewed and they say they don't see hope to stay in Cameroon and thrive, because all those that thrive in Cameroon are a small clique of the elite class who seem to be benefiting from the largesse of those that are running the CPDM party and the machine of the state and have the keys to the treasury. And they use part of the military to intimidate people with arbitrary arrest. And speaking of arrest, we still know that Joachim Chameni of l'Union pour le Changement and Issa Ekane, Professor Abao Yono, Florence Ticho, Fabrice Lena, as well as Aristide Mono, all of these important figures of the Cameroonian civil society, as well as opposition forces, have been arrested. and they are still detained, and they don't have access to legal counsel, neither to family, and there's little information about their arrest. The charges haven't been read publicly, so people don't even know exactly what they are being charged of. We do know that there's also a huge propaganda going on. There's a lot of misinformation on the internet. When we say it's propaganda and fake information, it's because when you try to fact check it and run the numbers and also run the allegations through real-time data, real-day events, it is impossible to come out with the truth. So it shows that they have been falsified documents and also implanted evidence to show that these people that were arrested committed some form of crime. Because if that was the case, then warrant of arrest would have been issued with a clear stipulation of the charges that are levied against them. But none of that has happened. So it almost seems like then the process is going on now to come out with some charges that will be levied against these people. And they say there are hundreds of arrests that also took place yesterday, Sunday, following this mass protest. And so many young people are languishing in different cells, and they are struggling to get legal counsel. And as such, it's important to take a moment to acknowledge some of the many organizations that are working tirelessly to make sure Cameroonians that are caught in the web of injustice continue to make their voice heard and continue to seek justice, as well as promote democracy in Cameroon. And we can just give a big shout out to a few, talking about Project Cameroon, known as Project C, that has done a fantastic job throughout this electoral process to continue to shed light on the legal issues that are plaguing the country, and also provide a space where you can have concrete information for those that are in Cameroon to be able to participate in the democratic process, as well as to have diplomats across the world and also leaders to see for themselves what's going on in Cameroon. We can also talk about big tech entrepreneurs like Rebecca Enonchong, who are using their expertise and their platforms to continue to promote the work of democracy and also civil society activism, and go beyond that to even provide legal assistance. And they've put out a few communiques that show list of lawyers, which we can mention, like the Maître Alinscombe, who come out themselves to tell you that they will support all those that have been caught in the trenches of injustice. Again, the team of lawyers put together by Issa Tchiroma Bakary's team. And as such, it's important that we put this information out there so you know who to contact if you're caught in the web of injustice, and follow these platforms and get up-to-date information about what's going on if you are caught in the trenches of injustice. There are so many communications outlets out there. You can mention someone like Mimi Mefo, and you know her story because she was one of the few female journalists in Cameroon back in the day that stood her grounds and was able to face the regime. And it's unfortunate that she had to leave the country under circumstances that you all know. And just to tell you that so many great journalists in Cameroon are outside of Cameroon, and because they chose to speak up, they chose to stand up for what is the truth, and they continue to use their voice and their platforms to shed light. And as you see the developments on the ground, it's just to tell you that there are so many people behind the scenes working tirelessly to make sure that you don't have this information, that things don't come to light. But when you look at all these other platforms and these forces that are working to make sure that they bring you fresh information, real facts, raw data on the field, it's because they want you to know that which those that are hiding the information don't want you to know. And it's important for democracy. And we do know that there are many more out there that continue to do invaluable work to help promote democracy, good governance, and also civil engagement in Cameroon. And we know that with information that we have from the ground based on the happenings of this post-verdict scenario and post-electoral turmoil and crisis in Cameroon, the story doesn't end here. The Constitutional Council may have spoken, but the people continue to speak. And they are speaking, and their voices are loud on the streets. You can see the videos, it continues to pour in. And it's so heartbreaking to hear Cameroonians, even those in the diaspora, who have worked tirelessly and want to return home, but can't return because they don't know where to return to. There's a lot that we see and we hear, because we do know that Cameroonians across the globe, all they want is a Cameroon that is united, strong, and thriving, so that everyone should have an opportunity to benefit from the resources that the country has. And they decry the fact that they are saddened to see that the 43-year-old regime has always brought big promises that have never been delivered. They can talk about greater realizations, great ambitions, and now it's greatness and hope. All these big slogans that feel so empty, because after 7 years, there is no balance sheet, there is no accountability. And yet, when the people decide to go and vote and choose a new leader for a transition, for some truth and reconciliation, for some reconstruction of the nation of Cameroon, the votes are denied. And therefore, observers are calling on the regime in place to take measures to make sure that the country stays stable. Because like we've told you before in previous videos, that Cameroon was a peaceful country in 1982 when the current president took office. And their hope is that he will return power to another person through the elections, because it's also believed that he has no idea and intention to hand over power through elections. And we do have reports of serious allegations levied against the regime in place, indicating that they intend to do a power transition among themselves. Therefore, the elite will keep the power and they will not do it through the ballot box. Because as you know, even after the proclamation of these results, there still have to be an inauguration, which usually happens at the National Assembly, where the president-elect goes and swears and says that they are going to take office and protect the institutions and so on and so forth. It's a ceremony, it's a ritual, it's a protocol that is yet to happen. And in the days ahead, we should not be surprised to see a communique indicating when that's going to take place. And they probably want to move fast and get it done, and therefore do that and make sure that they give some form of perceived legitimacy to the incumbent, and so that they can now start to execute the machine of the state. And there's heavy reports and allegations that there's going to be some form of transition within a few months to have a power go to one of the elites that are within the entourage of the current president. And Cameroonians are decrying that that is not what they voted for. And that is why other observers are pointing to the report that came from Jeune Afrique, indicating that the regime in Yaoundé had contacted Issa Tchiroma Bakary's team to propose a position of prime minister, and he turned it down, meaning that they are trying to prove to the world that there's some form of concession taking place, and they are trying to propose something to the opposition, and therefore they should accept it. However, the everyday Cameroonians on the streets, as well as other observers and opposition party leaders, continue to say that is not what the people voted for. If the people voted for Issa Tchiroma Bakary, they did not vote for a prime minister, they voted for a president, because that is the only way he can wield enough power to be able to transform the state. And it doesn't really sit well, because they know that the post of prime minister in Cameroon is a weak portfolio, a portfolio that does not really have the backbone of the government itself, and therefore usually disrespected by ministers in office. And so it makes sense why Issa Tchiroma Bakary, knowing the system from within, inside out, would have not accepted this proposal. Members of the government in office have not yet confirmed these allegations or this report that there was such a deal offered. However, we do know that the people in Yaoundé are trying to vacate to their businesses as usual, thinking that everything is okay. However, reports continue to flood in, showing videos and pictures of different parts of the country with a lot of unrest, protests, people on the streets chanting Issa Tchiroma Bakary's name and saying they're not going to take any more 7 years. And we do know of schools being burnt in Garoua. The school haven't been said to belong to the person that owns the home, the former ally of Issa Tchiroma Bakary, who owns the home that is next to his residence, where the snipers are said to have been perched and spotted shooting at residents and people protecting Issa Tchiroma Bakary. As well as you can see images from Douala, in Bafoussam, in Bafang, all across different cities. And I know that there's reports showing that the regime is trying to discredit these protests because they claim that it comes from the three main regions where the results show Issa Tchiroma Bakary had a good victory. And just so we're talking about these results, let's break it down a little bit for you to understand that the way the results were projected, and that is what is frustrating to many observers and those who have some of the report sheets that came from Issa Tchiroma Bakary's team, because he made them public. They are online, they are through a Google Drive. Anybody can access it. It's public domain now. And so these observers are decrying the fact that the way they think the results were doctored show that everywhere Issa Tchiroma Bakary won, they made the margin to be so slim and the voter turnout to be low. In any place where President Paul Biya was said to have won, they made the margin to be high, where he won with about 89%, 87, 67, 70 something, almost 90 in some cases. They made the margin to be wider, and they also made the voter turnout to be huge, so that the population density continues to be represented and the voter turnout continues to be magnified, to show some kind of rationale as to explain the results. But again, independent observers, some members of the opposition, as well as members of Issa Tchiroma Bakary's team, continue to point to the fact that this is not what transpired at the ballot box. Because the videos of irregularities and fraud, the allegations are all over the web, as well as the procès-verbal that came from the polling stations on the night of the elections that was tallied from different reputable sources, and also the observers from the Issa Tchiroma Bakary's team, as well as those that documented results from their polling stations and put them through the platform called DISO by Maitre Michel Ndoki, and also a big shout out to her team. And all of these platforms that were put together, because the reason they put these platforms together shows you that they did not have any confidence and trust and faith in Elections Cameroon Elecam, because they believe that in 2018 the elections in Cameroon was rigged, and therefore they were able to go through those maneuvers and try to replay it and see where they could block it from happening again this time. Because it so happens that elections in Cameroon have been highly contested. This is nothing new. But 2025 seems to have something unique, which is the vigilance of the people empowered through different platforms. We can talk about Maitre Michel Ndoki, who used her platform DISO to collect data. We could talk about different opposition parties, and even some members of the ruling CPDM party are said to have provided the original copies of their procès-verbal to the team of Issa Tchiroma. So it's not just fabricated results as they are trying to be discredited based on reputable sources that have provided alternatives to show that the results are not really tangible. And that is where the contrast is coming from. And we also can tell you that 2025 is so unique because the platforms that were used and the vigilance and the citizen engagement that was seen. Never before have we seen this level of participation by the youth in Cameroon. And therefore, as we've told you before, we were able to see the results in real time. So there was no necessity to wait for the Constitutional Council to come and read the results that observers, independent observers, opposition leaders don't recognize themselves in those results. And speaking of opposition leaders, many have questioned their credibility because just a moment ago, the president of the PCRN party, Cabral Libi, who ran in these elections and is said to have known the official results that came from the polling stations, has come out to congratulate the proclaimed winner of these elections and congratulate them through a communique that is circulating online. And we do hope that he's not going to come out and say that's a fake, that his signature is not there, it's not him, because that has been a tactic that has been used because in that communique he clearly states that the PCRN party takes note of the proclamation of results and then congratulates the winner. But then it's strange because all indication point to the fact that the results that were read have a great discrepancy with what came out of the ballot box. And they also said they have all the PVs, the procès-verbal. So they should be able to bring out their procès-verbal to contrast it with Issa Tchiroma Bakary's procès-verbal and to also contrast it with the results that were proclaimed by the Constitutional Council. But again, that is a stretch because from the communique, it's clear that he's not ready to go that road. And that is why he's been accused of siding with the regime and working with the regime, because the allegations that the opposition parties have levied against the regime has been the fact that they accuse the regime in place, the 43-year-old regime, to use tactics to create their own fake opposition, to show semblance of some kind of plurality, to create their own fake media organizations, to claim some sort of freedom of expression and freedom of speech. They create their own fake civil society to claim some sort of support for their activities, and so on and so forth. And they, in every place where there is a strong voice that is opposing them, which is a legitimate voice, they create some form of dissent and divide and rule. And that has been the case for so many decades. And that explains why, to the credit of the Cameroonian people, let's take this moment to thank all the Cameroonians, home and abroad, that voted, those that voted in the 108 polling station across the diaspora, those that voted at home, those that supported the voters, those that engaged in civic activity, because the civic participation and voter turnout was very high, given the current situation in the country and all the different challenges that we all know. In some areas, it's difficult to go to your polling station. The roads are not good. The weather doesn't help in spaces where there's rainy season. There's mud. There's impassable roads. People don't have the resources sometimes to even pay a cab to go to these polling stations to go and vote. People were even forced to pay to get their voters card in some centers because the voters card came so late. Elections Cameroon has been blamed for doing things very late, last minute, as if to say they didn't didn't want people to turn out massively to vote so that they should have the opportunity to stuff ballot box and do their usual thing, and so on and so forth. So it's an important moment that the voices of those that have said that Elections Cameroon did a very poor job, and also commend the Cameroon people for their resilience and their ability to turn out massively to vote and to protect their vote despite the conditions that were not favorable for them. Some people did not even know their real polling stations, and we can also report that some surrogates of the CPDM party have taken to different media platforms to call other Cameroonians all sorts of names because they don't agree with the fact that these results were published from the polling stations, and therefore they kept giving them bad rep. And so they also claim that the results are free, fair, and transparent, and therefore those that are complaining are disgruntled Cameroonians that are manipulated and want to create some form of insurrection and violence. However, when you stack the evidence on the field and you see what's happening across different platforms, and you listen to even international independent observers from different international organizations, because the various international observers and diplomats that have been able to say something about the elections in Cameroon, one thing comes out clear. They do know the truth, they know what transpired, but because of the sovereignty of the country and the non-interference policy, it's impossible to see international bodies come in to rescue Cameroonians. It means that Cameroonians, at this point, we can conclude that Cameroonians are the only ones that would really free themselves from the dungeons or from the fangs of those that have held them captive, based on the same reports that we get on the field, that Cameroonians feel like they have their backs against the wall and there's no one in the world that can come to their rescue. And therefore, if they are going to lick their wounds, as they say, if they are going to try to console themselves in this moment of despair, if they are going to protest peacefully, if they are going to go to sleep and forget about it and wait for 7 years, if they are going to continue to push for change using all the democratic instruments possible, those are the questions that one cannot answer. However, we continue to stay alert and stay informed as we keep a close eye as to what is happening in Cameroon, and bring you those developments as they occur, and continue to follow every detail that comes from every corner of the country, as these days don't look like they are going to be quiet days in Cameroon because of the amount of information that is coming out and the amount of unrest that we see. It's unprecedented, never seen in Cameroon history. And that is why if you listen to experts across the globe that have managed elections and those that have worked in conflict zones, they can tell you that Cameroon is at a very difficult turn. And a global economist has even pointed to the fact that the Biya regime is on shaky grounds. And this mandate is not going to be considered a legitimate mandate. As many observers have already started coming out to decry the amount of violence. And it seems like the death toll is only going to go up, which is very unfortunate in a country where the young, all they wish for is just to be alive and to succeed in their dreams. But would they succeed their dreams when they have a small class of the elite, of old elites that are almost closer to their 90s and 100s, trying to hold on to the reins of power and not give way for the young to take over and continue to pilot the destiny of the state, the country, and the nation that is called Cameroon. And therefore, we continue to appeal to the military in Cameroon and the forces of law and order to not heed the call of destruction or arrest and torture and death towards their own fellow citizens, because these are their brothers and sisters. And therefore, they should know that these are the youth, these are the people that have the future of that country at heart. And they should continue to observe the democratic rights of every Cameroonian. And those that are ready to protest, they should use democratic instruments and continue to do so peacefully for as long as it takes. And we don't know if Issa Tchiroma Bakary will survive this week based on the high level of tension and the amount of attacks that are being reported around his residence. And we continue to have our gaze on Cameroon, and we pray for peace, and we also pray for justice, because peace without justice is fear, is terror, is tyranny, is autocracy, is everything but democracy. So we are calling on all those who are championing peace to first of all seek the truth. Because only the truth that came out of the ballot boxes on October 12th would liberate the people and bring change, meaningful change, that will put the nation Cameroon on the map of emerging democracies. Stay informed, stay alert, stay vigilant. But above all, may God bless Cameroon.